if we don't address mental health issues or things that are disturbing us, then we end up reacting to things in a way that we shouldn't. That's why we should first work on ourselves so that we don't end up harming other people because my mental health is not okay. To government, for example, let us not wait until it's popular to talk about femicide for all of us to start having them on our platform. But really, let us make sure that we have some existing frameworks that are working throughout. As we advance these conversations, we really need to focus on bringing all of us together so that we are able to solve the issues before we go back and look for that boy child again. I mean, they are equally important in the society, not only in Kenya, and I think the African continent as a whole. We still have so much to do, and from the leadership perspective, and to really advance these conversations, and even for the male leaders to look at female leaders with what they bring and who they are, because sometimes that's where the problem starts. Do they appreciate that we could be bringing something to the table that is not what they have in mind? So, yeah.
Welcome to Democracy Pulse. This is a dialogue series that is powered by the Oslo Center. And we are going to be focusing on the 16 days of activism. And our theme today is advancing gender inclusive governance, policy reforms, and collaborative action to end gender-based violence. And today I have a guest with us, Miss Anita Soina, a climate advocate, a political leader, a community development worker. Tell us more about yourself.
Thank you very much for having me in this great series. My name is Anita Soina. I am a climate change advocate. I come from Kajiado, and I also identify as a green politician because I champion for progressive politics, to say, and also an SDG and digital sustainability influencer, and work mostly with the rural, marginalized, and indigenous communities. Yes.
Yes, wonderful. And as the world marks the 16 days of activism, and as Kenya grapples with the whole issues around gender-based violence and in the political and democracy space, from your experience, what is your perspective?
I think, first of all, it's interesting that we have these days because it means then we have 16 days of actively having this conversation. And it's good that when the conversation has started, then it means we are going to a good direction, because everything starts with a conversation. And I think my biggest point is usually that in these gender conversations, we tend to turn it into gender wars of gender A versus gender B. But what we really need to do is come together as all genders to really address this issue. So once we acknowledge that we still have gender-based violence, and now then come together and speak about these issues without actually confronting each other, but just talking with each other to confront the situation. Of course, I'm one person who's really grown up witnessing the worst part of GBV. It's something I don't think I'm even comfortable to talk about. But as you grow up, you don't realize how much these things do affect us, who we are, what we think about people, what we think about a certain gender, unfortunately. But I'm happy, and I think this is one of the reasons why I continue to add my voice to it, give my platform to speak about the issues. And I feel like we still have so many gaps when it comes to policies, because it's one thing for a policy to exist, but it's another for it to really function. And
Yeah, and given your background, having run for office in Kajiado North, and that's amazing. How would you relate this conversation to your community? If you were to have this dialogue in your community in Kajiado, what kind of engagements would come up from the people of Kajiado?
I think, and not just the people of Kajiado, but majorly like the pastoralist communities and all that, we still have that cultural setups and culture rules and how they have been from way back, and which sadly most of the times do not favor the girl child or women or something like that. And especially when it comes to leadership, it's something very interesting because we are told where we belong, in the society, that this is not for you. Or nowadays, because we have the position of women representative, you're asked to go and compete with your fellow women because that's where you belong to. But I can say the conversation is improving and it's changing, but not really much. In Kajiado, I can say we have the cosmopolitan regions, like Kajiado East, where Peris Tobiko was the member of parliament, and Kajiado North, that's where I come from, where at least because of so many communities living in those regions, you find that things are changing as compared to where we just purely the masses. That's where we still have a challenge. And I feel like local governments also should come on board, now, as for us who've been privileged at least to have these platforms, to at least have these conversations and focus on capacity building and training them to really understand these issues, because then they cannot advance them if they do not understand what is that in the first place and how it's important and why it's important for us to have the opportunities as well.
And now, narrowing it down from a broader perspective, how has your experience been as a little girl, as growing up in Kajiado? Did you grow up in Kajiado? And how was school for you? And how did you identify yourself as a leader in the community? When did you actually discover that there's a lot more you could champion for outside the things you had known already? Why did you pick the fields you have picked today? What do they mean to you as Anita? Yes.
Yeah, so first of all, I was born in Kajiado, in Isinya to be specific. But then I moved to Bomet, to my grandfather's place. That is from a very young age. I went to school normal. I was a very, not really, I can't say hard-headed child, but I was that child who was everywhere in school. I was a very bubbly, I talk a lot.
Yes.
To date, I'm sure you know that. I talk a lot, and that's how I was as a child.
Yes.
And I think having a chance to grow up with my grandfather really changed so much about myself, and I think it's the reason that has contributed to who I am, because he was a political leader. He was so much into politics and leadership. He championed for education, which I do. And he was known in the society. He was that person who was known, very strict as well. And every time he came home, he'd tell us to keep quiet because it's news time. He had his radio, and so we have to keep quiet, or if you can't, you go and sleep. And those things shaped me, because from when I was in primary, I'd read the newspaper from front page by page, and read the stories and learn about that. And I was not a fan of the middle page or the back page, where there's fun stuff for children. But over time, and then when he passed on, my life, everything changed, because that was like my father figure. I spent so much time of my childhood with him. But then grew up, continued with school. Life has to go on. Life has to move. I went to high school, and in high school I was part of the scouting club. So scouting club, of course, you don't want to miss out on school activities. But then in Form 3, I was made the chairperson of the scouting club. So I had responsibilities, and so we had to organize things, tree planting, community work in the school, cleaning the school, the hospital nearby. And I think also that really helped me to engage in such activities. And so when I was going to get done with my high school education, was 2016. And so we had the 2017 elections. Straight away, I was supporting anybody that was in Jubilee at that time. And I wasn't eligible to vote. So I only had to use my digital platform that I had at that time to talk about politics, to talk about these issues. And I met one of my mentors. His name is Eric Masanza. And he asked me, what are you doing? Like, young girl, you're 17. What are you doing in this space? I said, I just want to be in spaces to learn things, how I can contribute positively to the society. And he said, you must learn about SDGs. I had never heard about that. And that is when now he started taking me through the SDGs and asked me, which one do you think you love and which one do you think you resonate? After trying to do everything.
You did all the 17.
I wanted to do everything. Yeah. And so he had to tell me that, no, you don't have to do everything. Somebody else will do something else. Yes. So we all have to do our little part. Yeah. And that's how I ended up focusing on climate action. And now in the process, you realize that all these things are interconnected. Climate and gender, interconnected. Climate and education, climate and food, climate, everything, health. And so that's when I realized then I can still do what I love still in the climate space, because there's a nexus between that and so many other things. And so that's how I ended up doing what I do, having a foundation that supports education for rural children, speaking about politics every day on my platform, even when it's not comfortable.
Yes.
And I can say in one way or another, growing a thick skin when I didn't think I'll need that. Yeah.
And would you term the political environment space for women as friendly?
Oh, no, I don't think it's really friendly. It's toxic. And even though physical harm or physical violence may not be really much, it's so much the cyberbullying. People believe that we don't really deserve, and it's very sad, because I see so many young women that I look up to who are lucky to be in leadership position, who've either been elected or nominated. I admire how they speak and how they represent. But then it's sad that then people think they didn't deserve it.
Yes.
And this now brings me back to the conversation of we need to make our political ground really fair for everyone, so that when it comes to nominations, we also have men getting nominated, not just the youthful ones, but because women were elected enough.
Yes.
Because once we have that, if you look at our nomination lists, and if you see, it's women and very few young men, but because they are elected and we are not. So to try and balance, we have to be nominated.
Yes.
But I think once we create a good environment, a very conducive environment for elective positions, it becomes easier, because then we get elected, and then we balance how the election side and we also balance the nomination side. But you can't even have a picture with your role model who's a male who's a male. Maybe you admire someone. There's a leader that you do admire so much. Maybe you like how they speak. They could be your mentors and all that, because we can't walk this journey alone.
Yes.
And I don't know. It's okay, that's how you got your nomination. And it's usually very crazy. And I think that's what hurts most people the most, because they work hard. People don't sleep. If it was that easy, then everybody will be getting it.
Yes.
People do work for it. People do position themselves.
Yes.
People show what they are able to do, what they bring to the table, or how they form the table. Yeah.
And I know you're not just a community worker, but you do a lot of work globally. When you look at Kenya in that framework of political environment, especially for women and young women like yourself, how would you place Kenya in comparison to one of the countries maybe you have seen to have different kinds of policies? How would you place Kenya in the global map in terms of political advocacy for women or political engagement for women, in your view?
Well, maybe to say within the African continent, we may not be the best. Of course, Rwanda is doing amazing with women, supporting women in leadership. And when it comes to other countries, for them, it's not, they don't have the barriers that we do have from, what I talked about before. From the initial stages, they don't have such kind of barriers. It's almost the same for them and their male counterparts. Not as we are, not only in Kenya, and I think the African continent as a whole, we still have so much to do, and from the leadership perspective, and to really advance these conversations, and even for the male leaders to look at female leaders with what they bring and who they are, because sometimes that's where the problem starts. Do they appreciate that we could be bringing something to the table that is not what they have in mind? So yeah, but it's great we're having such conversations with people like you, and we've seen the improvement over years. A good example is the governors, for example, where we had 1, 2, and now 7. So I think it means that we are moving somewhere. Yeah, and it's because more women are coming up and more women are taking up the spaces, and they're being bold, courageous, fearless, and also more role models are coming up, and others encouraging the other young girls that you also can do this.
Yeah, many women have explained that the political environment is too rough, and you have explained that you've termed it as toxic.
Very.
There's a lot of cyberbullying. There's a lot of the terrain just makes it a very even sexual abuse as well. We've seen that in different encounters.
Yeah.
I mean, who would you say plays the sole responsibility of ensuring that there's more sanitation in the political environment?
I think, honestly, it's the women that have gone before us. And I feel sorry because I feel like I'm putting a burden on them.
Yes.
But I feel like they're the ones who should create these spaces for us. And I really thank people like Millie Mabona. She likes to, when she sees a young person who is trying to get to the space, or any woman anywhere, the first thing she does is support that person. And then later she will ask, oh, who was that? And it's good because she has added her voice so much and become a strong support system for the young female leaders, even in parliament. And I think that's what we need more. We need that kind of support because you've been there.
Yes.
The same way we also do that in different fields, outside politics, in climate, in education. That's what we do. Understanding that I've been here before and it wasn't easy. So we need to have that platform for women to encourage others when they are young, when they are still girls, so that they can grow up knowing that we have support, we have a safe space to share. Also, sometimes we just need to share what we experience because, and I know these during the campaigns, even in political parties, it's not easy. If not for the hefty fee, then it comes to sometimes you really want to do something, even attending an event, and some of the male politicians will really make it hard for you, and you'll just see the direction they're going to, so they'll just make it hard for you. And so at that time, we just need to speak up. You need somebody you can go to. So in the leadership of political parties, we need people who can provide safe spaces for people to speak about what they're going through, for people to talk about what can we do. Yes.
Yeah, I know political parties have internal disputes committees. Do you think they are doing enough? Because they are set up exactly for that.
I don't think so, because from what I experienced in the last campaigns, and from what I hear from other people, I think we still have a gap. And even as women ourselves, when we talk about being engaged, it has to be meaningful, not just to be called and say, women, come here, here is our charter, or women, let's... No, is it meaningful? Where is the implementation bit of it? So we could be having that, but is it really working for or against?
Yeah. And I saw you recently, you were part of the COP conversations. I saw you in Baku and the amazing work you're doing. And you mentioned that climate touches on everything we are doing in society. How would you link climate change or climate work or climate governance into gender-based violence? What is the link between the two?
I will give you my experience. And the issue, for example, where I come from, climate change affects such regions in a very bad way, such that when it's drought, it's really It's really worse droughts.
Dry, yeah.
Yeah, and then when it rains, it's floods. And also coming from a pastoralist communities where fathers have to move with their cattle, they have to move with their families. There's a lot of, they have to move with their sons, maybe in search of pasture and such kind of stuff. During the last drought, people are moving from Kajiado to Narok to graze. So that means families are disconnected and sometimes they never get back together. It's the responsibility of women to provide food in their families. And so where do they get it when we do not have food, for example? Girls have to skip school to go fetch water with their parents, to take care of their siblings when they are still young. And even after the drought, when people have lost cows, they want cows. And when they want cows, the fastest thing they can do is to marry off their daughters as young as they could be. I'm wearing this wristband. It's becoming small, but it was made by one child that I rescued.
Oh, nice.
It was made by one child that I rescued. It's become small, but I still wear it because it really encourages me a lot, because this girl was 11 years old when she got pregnant. And when we went to her village, we wanted to listen to her story, the story of the family, and to know how we can support them. And the father, my friends bought goats for the family, and the father wanted to even go with those goats. He wants to marry off that child by force. And it's not an easy thing, because even the local leadership in such areas, that's what they believe in, you know. Even the local areas, the chiefs, you could find some of them still believe that that's how things should work, because they come from the same cultural setup. But we had to explain. It took us months for the father to understand why we need to do all this stuff, why the girl is equally important, why it's good for her to go back to school, how her being educated will support him in future. And he agreed. And that's made me realize that sometimes we go to communities thinking that we just have to go with finances, like I'm going to take these children to school. But if their parents do not believe that's important. And so in the same GBV issues, we should focus more on behavior change, because if we don't focus on behavior change, then the problem will not end. Yeah.
And who can we task with this responsibility of ensuring that there's behavior change? Who would you say?
I can say it's a collective effort.
Yes.
It's a collective effort that requires everybody, from engaging the local leaders themselves. And because I look at local governments, the county governments are equally very important in this. Because if we have national policies, how do we domesticate these policies? It's through the local governments. And also I can say the NGOs, the public and the private sector, all of us have to come together and really push this conversation, and also focus more on training communities for behavior change. And then that way we'll have a long-term impact.
Yes, and Anita, I don't think we can have a gender-based violence conversation and not talk about the current happenings in Kenya, where we're having a lot of femicide cases, and the president even had to acknowledge or talk about it during even the State of the Nation address. And we also saw him flanked by women who he works with, and talking about femicide becoming an issue. What do you make of this?
We don't want them to talk about femicide because it's a, how do I put it? Because it's something that is being talked about.
Because it's a current issue.
Yeah, exactly. Because these are things that have been happening before. We have had these cases before. This year we also had same marches for ending femicide, even in February.
Yes.
And it's about when people, when people are doing these things, what is the punishment like?
Yes.
Yes. You're arrested 1 minute, the next minute you're released on very little money, and then you're out and that's it. Then it won't make sense. We really need to make it punishable, and really, really we need to take it as a very serious offense, because such cases they end up causing deaths.
Yes.
I don't think it's even children that have to lose their mothers, their fathers to these things. And I will also say that it's important that we also look at GBV against men, because as we continue to advance the gender-based violence communications, sometimes we really don't emphasize more also on what the men go through in homes, in families and all that. But for sure, men need to do something because it has to start with them. They don't have to wait for us to speak about us for them to attack us, but it's also for them to speak about these issues. They shouldn't keep quiet if they're going through the same. And because they keep quiet and then they shame us for speaking about ours. So they should learn to speak up. And so that we are also able to protect the boy child, because really the way time is going, it's good that we are being empowered as women, but it's also careful. It's also good that we be careful we don't leave the boy child behind, because we will start afresh. The way we started for the girl child, we will have to go back and look for that boy child. So I think we also need to find the balance in that.
The balance in the two.
Yes.
But I wonder how a man will be, whether they'll be comfortable going to a police station to report that their wife beat them up.
Yeah, because I know of someone who said the police laughed. Sasa wewe unapigwaje, you know? And that's why I'm saying it's a conversation that we really need to normalize, because then in the end, you realize that there are men who are going through really worse, even in their marriages, for example, being beaten, but they cannot do anything because it's also not good to do the same, or maybe they know that the society will judge them harshly as compared to how it judges the other ones. So, but I'm not really saying it's, I'm just saying that as we advance these conversations, we really need to focus on bringing all of us together so that we are able to solve the issues before we go back and look for that boy child again. I mean, they are equally important in the society. Yeah.
Are you aware of any laws or policies that could help regulate this cases of femicides that we are having becoming too rampant across the country?
One thing I'm sure is you're not short of policies.
Yeah.
I am sure we have so many policies.
Yes.
We just need to see them implemented.
Yes.
Because we have taken corruption down to even GBV issues, you know, where it's easy, they can just be excused. You know, the perpetrators are excused for maybe they know who, for maybe they are rich, for maybe these. Then that one will continue happening. And that's why you realize that when we have these femicide conversations, they always happen back to back, even in the middle of such conversations, because people see that, oh, you can get away with it before somebody just decides to hit someone. And if they remember, you know, the repercussions, it's easier for them not to engage in such activities. Yeah.
And there are a lot of conversations going about coupling the issues of femicide to do with mental health challenges. Do you see a connection in that, or what is your take?
I see a link in that because, like I said, sometimes we react differently to issues, and in one or another, if we don't address mental health issues or things that are disturbing us, then we end up reacting to things in a way that we shouldn't. That's why we should first work on ourselves so that we don't end up harming other people, because my mental health is not okay. And in the first place, I was not okay. I was not addressing that challenge in me.
Yes.
So I feel like we also need to advance these conversations of mental health and really look at them seriously, because then these also could be effects of the same.
And do you think the most culprits are young people, or what is your view on the demographic that is being targeted? Or
young people for sure, and of course it's people of all ages, but mostly young people. We've seen that, and also because there are so many issues coming up. It's really tough times. You know, people want to take advantage, and the easiest person to catch will always be that young person. But still, we've seen this happen also in households where people have even lived together for 30, 40 years, and this still happens. And it's also good that the statistics, the data, the information is given as raw as it is.
Yes.
You know, so that it can act as a wake-up call for us to see how urgent these issues are. So we really need those statistics, data, so that they can help us.
Yeah, so we need like more like a Me Too movement. People need to really speak up and say, that I have gone through this.
Yeah.
It has no social class or any kind of demographic. Everybody's going through it, and they have to speak out to show that it's actually a menace that the society is having to grapple with. And as we wind up the conversation, how would you frame your call to action? What do you think the different stakeholders in society should do, or what would you ask for people to look out for in terms of dealing with gender-based violence and the gender-based violence conversations?
First, I'll say that to government, for example, let us not wait until it's popular to talk about femicide for all of us to start having them on our platforms. But really, let us make sure that we have some existing frameworks that are working throughout, whether there is a famous case or there is a non-famous case or something. But we need to make sure that from down to the to the local governments where people can access, where we have safe spaces, justice for victims for GBV, and to ask that as members of the society, it's also our responsibility to take care of each other, to listen to one another, to talk to one another, and let us normalize dialogue instead of fights. It's really important. And lastly, we just need to come together. And the problem is not our genders. The problem is not female versus male or something. The problem is GBV that also affects you as men. So please join the table. Let us have this conversation together. We are not fighting you. We are not saying we are superior. We are not saying you're not important. You're so important to us as well. But just come, let us have the conversation and we deal with the problem.
All right. Yes. Thank you so much, Anita Soena. Thank you so much for coming and having this very important and pertinent conversation. I have been your host, Angel Mbuthia. Thank you so much for tuning in.